We are in the midst of the largest childhood epidemic probably in the history of the world, certainly of our time. We have an epidemic of neurobehavioral disorders like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and they're increasing at an alarming rate. Autism 10 years ago was known as a rare disorder that was diagnosed approximately 1 in 10,000 children in the United States. It's believed that in the United States it's probably now actually less than 1 in 50. Although that rise is alarming with autism, ADHD is actually the leading childhood disorder in the world of any kind. It is the #1 reason why a child will be medicated. And worldwide use of stimulant medication for ADHD has tripled since 1993.
Well, I say that ignorance is not the way to go, because there's an epidemic out there, and ignorance is not, we don't have time for ignorance. You people better get back, get on and understand that there are programs out there, okay, that you don't have to use drugs for, that you can just, come and have your child try. Go to a lecture, see what this is all about, open your mind a little, because it's time.
Okay, beautiful, okay. I had a parent contact me and say, "Can you help my son?" And turns out that he was a boy with autism that had been diagnosed with what we call PDD. He was 3.5 years old, had not spoken a word his whole life. And the parents came in, and I remember to this day sitting there at the desk with them and tears in their eyes telling me how they were told by a professional that there was no hope and that the best they could hope for was that their son would be in an institution someday, or worse. I started working with Daniel, and within 3 weeks his mom came in, again with tears in her eyes, but this time it was tears of joy because Daniel had spoken his first words, spontaneously. He had tried many things before. So he had said mom and dad, of course, which was incredible to them. He had spoken some of the names of the siblings, and it was just an amazing moment, and it impacted me in a way that nothing that I had done in my professional career had impacted me like. To have a child that couldn't speak. I don't think there's any greater miracle than that.
Brain Balance Centers are centers that are located throughout the nation. It's an after-school program in which we work with children with all learning disabilities, from dyslexia, Tourette, ADHD, and autism.
Any parent that I come into contact with now that has a child with an issue of any kind, recommend the program to. I have stopped in supermarkets, at karate lessons. Whenever I hear of somebody who's got an issue, whether it be ADHD, autism, Asperger's, dyslexia, whatever it may be.
Go ahead, go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Dr. Melillo's concept is brand new, cutting edge. The science on which it is based has at least a 35-year history underneath it.
I needed to understand what was actually happening in the brain of these children, and what I found very frustrating as a parent was that I went to people that were so-called professionals, and they just looked at me and said, nobody knows. Or they would say something like, it's a biochemical imbalance, it's genetic, and there's nothing you can do about it. Neither one of those answers really satisfied me with my knowledge base, so I realized at that point it was because they just didn't know, and I needed to do my own research. So I spent many years really compiling that research, which eventually found its way into a book called Neurobehavioral Disorders of Childhood from an Evolutionary Perspective, which was my first textbook. And in that I laid the groundwork of the theory. And the main problem is what we call a functional disconnection, which means that areas of the brain are not communicating, that they're just not in sync with one another, that they can't share information because they have a different processing speed. And the importance of that as well is that what we see is that there is nothing broken in the brain of these children. There is no pathology. There's no damage that we can see. That's one of the things that stands out in these children, that when MRIs are done, we don't see anything. So what's the problem? The problem is a functional problem. It's not a problem where there's a damage in an area of the brain. The problem is poor communication between areas of the brain. So what we know is that we can restore that, we can change that, we can improve that through various types of exercises and activities. Plasticity means that the brain is moldable, that it's pliable, just like plastic. And neuroplasticity means that the brain can change. And that's basically the definition, that the brain can physically and chemically change based on stimulation and training. But it has to be utilized with very specific and defined principles. It has to be done in a way that is repetitive. It needs to be individualized to the child. It needs to be done in a way that's going to be progressively challenging. It has to be done with precise timing and with specific stimuli. It's about specifically stimulating the brain and doing it in a way that then stimulates growth and development in a particular area of the brain, so that the brain will literally become faster. Areas of the brain will become faster and speed up to catch up to other areas of their brain that have already been faster, and that's really the whole idea of the functional disconnection. When parents are told that the problem is genetic, that it is something that is not correctable, I've seen the hope just come out of their eyes. And so this book, as much as raising awareness, is also out there to raise hope, to be able to restore hope in parents and families.
So she hasn't dominated a hand yet, and that's kind of important because that tells us that there's definitely some immaturity going on.
So what we do is we educate the parent first and foremost. We explain to them what's actually happening with their child. A lot of what we have to do is actually counteract what they've been told before, which is often wrong, like that your child has no hope, or that your child can't be helped, that your child has a genetic problem and there's nothing we can do about it. So, you know, if somebody tells you that, you kind of give up. And then when you do something, you're not really doing it wholeheartedly because you really don't believe it's going to work. So one of the things we have to do is actually sometimes get the parent reconnected so that they can have hopes and dreams and that they start to actually be happy themselves. A lot of these parents are, you know, really frustrated and angry and in pain. And that creates an incredibly negative environment. They don't mean to create a negative environment, but they're in pain. They can't help it. And so one of the things we have to do is try to get the parent out of pain and reconnect with them.
From a mother's standpoint, when you are noticing different things that are going on with your child that are not typical, and you think that there's a whole bunch of different issues going on, to sit and listen to Dr. Melillo talk, you find out that everything is related and that you're not driving yourself crazy. And the words that came out of my mouth when I was telling other people about it seem to be what I read when I read other people's testimonials. And that phrase is constantly, they take all the little pieces of your child and complete the puzzle. Like all these little miscellaneous things all of a sudden fit together after listening to him speak. And that was what made me want to have him evaluated here and see if this was something that could help him.
The way we do that is through a really comprehensive evaluation, and that's really what starts it all off. The evaluation really looks at everything, and it's based on mostly standard measures.